Hi, welcome. My name is Courtney Terry, and this is Arts Alive. My guest today is Patriciafaye Marshall, who a longtime community member, activist, volunteer, and now memoir writer. Thank you for joining me today, Patriciafaye.
I'm really happy to be here, Courtney, and especially with you.
Oh, thank you. So I was so excited to hear that you were writing a memoir. Where did that idea begin, and what made you want to share your story?
Yeah, I think writing is an aspect of who I am. And I've been writing ever since I learned how to write. I mean, I started keeping a diary when I was in the 5th grade and kept a year diary every year until I was 20.
Wow.
And over the years, you know, I have all kinds of journals and notebooks and all kinds of stuff, and have almost published a book several times, but something has stopped me. I think it was probably divine timing. Just with the world where it is and humanity on the verge of some kind of existential crisis and leap into a new paradigm, I'm 77 years old, and so if I'm ever going to do this memoir, you know, it's like I better do it now. Yes. So that got me started, and I set out to do an audiobook. That was what appealed to me most, because my book is going to have its roots in Mississippi, and with my Mississippi accent, I just figured I ought to do an audiobook. But then I found out, after I'd already bought all the equipment, microphone, done the software program, done everything to learn how to do an audiobook, found out that I had to have a written manuscript first. Oh. So I have set out, I'm doing a Word document, and I'm on page 58, and I'm up to age 24. It's not necessarily chronological. My working title is Mississippi and Beyond, From Shame to Glory Through the Heart of a Woman. And the tagline is as it is because I was literally born into a very dysfunctional family in rural Mississippi, alcoholism, suicide, you name it, and poor. And my life journey has been absolutely unpredictable and amazing that I have wound up where I am in a place that I call glory.
Yeah.
So the tagline being From Shame to Glory, and so I'm trying to write on that trajectory. You may ask why this particular story that I'm going to read from my memoir today is on that trajectory, and I don't know that it is, but after you hear it, you'll know that I could not have left it out.
Well, and it's all just a part of who you are and where you came from. Well, would you like to go ahead and read the excerpt?
Okay. Like I said, there's been a lot of very challenging obstacles on my path, but this may be, and I think you will agree with me, the most challenging that I met up with. So in the summer of 1966, my husband and I flew off to Guyana, South America with 48 other recent college grads. We were the first Peace Corps group to Guyana. Bill and I were stationed in the Rupununi savannas back on the border of Brazil in a Makushi Indian village. It was to be a 2-year stint. The area was both savanna land and dense tropical jungle. We lived on a tributary of the Amazon and were to teach in a makeshift school administered by an aging Franciscan monk. The snake. Some of the locals taught us how to hunt alligators in the river at night with lanterns. Their practice was to stun them with a kind of poison on the tip of an arrow so they could cut off their tails with a machete. The tail meat was delicious, and in this area protein was in short supply. The story was that their tails grew back. I don't know if they really did or not. On a weekend that November, a British timberman we knew took Bill and me on a camping/alligator hunting excursion. That first night, we actually shot what we thought was a very large gator. Too big to do anything with in the dark, so we marked the spot and planned to return at daybreak. The next morning, Bill and I left Joe at camp and arrived at the spot where a big white belly was protruding out of the water, right where we had marked the spot the night before. The rifle just happened to be in this little small dugout that we were in that had a 5-horsepower engine. And so Bill picked up the rifle, and there was one shot left in it, and he said, let's just make sure this thing is dead before we start to mess with it. And so he put one shot into the belly of this animal, and when he did, 15 feet in each direction, something comes crashing up out of the bush. It's like, oh my God, what could be that big? Is this the Loch Ness Monster? You know, what is this? So we get the little boat started and we go back to camp. We get Joe, we get the pistol, we get the axe, and we head back. Now, I was 21.
Okay.
You know, at a little older age, we might have just been okay and content with our question of what in the world was that, but not then. So we go back. And it's getting denser and darker as we go into this little part of the river. It's a tributary of the Amazon, and it's like a cul-de-sac where we are. We're going to have to come out the same way we went in. And I'm up in the bow of the boat. My husband is in about the middle of the boat with the rifle. I've got a pistol. And Joe is in the tail end of the boat with an axe. And as we start going into this really deep, dense part of the jungle, I mean, it was like we were inside of a tunnel because it was so dense, barely room for our little boat to go through. And I'm up in the bow of the boat, and I'm looking ahead. It wasn't where we had just shot something. It was not there, but you could feel its presence. I'm up in the front of the boat, and suddenly I see this thing coming towards us with like this much of itself out of the water, just weaving back and forth. It's an anaconda, the biggest anaconda you can imagine. And those things are constrictors. It's looking for something to wrap, and it's headed for our boat. Now, there was a battle that took over 4 hours. There were times when we were skin to skin with this animal, trying to keep it from wrapping the boat. Already the piranha were attacking the anaconda. There was also baby alligators, caiman they call them, electric eels, sting. There was everything in this water. If our boat had capsized, that would have been the total end. Well, I think that I am probably the person who did the most damage to that snake, because at one point I had the barrel of the pistol flush with the snake's head and emptied the chamber. There was like 8 shots in there, and I emptied it, and then the snake, that's when it started to kind of let go and do its death throes in the water. It got us hemmed in there. We couldn't get past it, so we had to wait until all the movement ceased before we could get out. Excuse me, I'm going to take a breath here.
Oh my goodness. I think I need one too.
Okay. So, you know, it was, what we did was we roped it. We eventually got, you know, we knew that it was dead, and so we roped it, and we very slowly towed it upriver to a rock quarry where they had winches and a pier and stuff like that, so they could get the snake up there and weigh it. And the thing weighed 476 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
The first thing we did was to cut its belly open, where we found a full-grown bush pig. Oh, the pig weighed nearly 100 pounds. It was 28 feet long, right at 28 feet long. My husband and I had been collecting specimens for Smithsonian at the time, and so we were in communication with them about this whole adventure, sent them lots of pictures. And they said that a snake that first of all, there had never been a snake this big in captivity. And that a snake that big was probably at least 75 years old, only ate once a year. So this poor creature had just swallowed its yearly meal and was laying there starting to digest it when we came along and put a bullet in its belly. Now, we got letters from environmentalists. This was 1967. I mean, back then, I mean, you know, there was quite an environmentalist movement going on already. And so my husband's mother got a hold of the story, and she got pictures, and she had it in all the newspapers. And so we started to get letters from, you know, environmentalists complaining about what we had done. But, you know, anybody else, well, first of all, anybody in their right mind wouldn't have gone back in there. But you know,
you were young.
Here we were, and we basically, you know, we just did what we needed to do to survive.
Oh my goodness.
So, writing now at 77, I can tell you that this experience has remained close in my consciousness throughout my whole life.
Yes.
When major challenges have arisen, I remember this snake. And in a shamanic sort of way, I feel like some of the power of that creature, its tenacity and courage, became my own, enabling me to overcome and even survive those extreme obstacles that would have otherwise defeated me. And I've also come to know that the snake holds the wisdom of the divine feminine. During that 4-hour battle, I'd seen my life up until then pass before my eyes, and I had my first taste of death.
Oh my goodness.
That's it.
That's fantastic. And that's
there are pictures. Now, I don't know how they were.
Yes, yeah, I will. The pictures are being, will be
great.
shown.
Okay.
But, wow. And so, did you, when you started writing, was that kind of one of the first stories that really solidified and was like, I can get this down on paper?
You know, I had never written the story down before, but there's a funny thing about memory that I've learned since I've been trying to write a memoir, and that is that the first time you tell a story about an experience that you've had, that's the way you tell it. Mm-hmm. I have just found out an interesting piece of this story. There was another person in the boat.
Oh.
I had totally forgotten about her. It's only because I'm recently back in touch with her and told her about my writing. And she was a high school student who was living with my husband and I at the time as we were Peace Corps volunteers, teachers. Mm-hmm. And she had a very unhappy home situation, and she had moved in with us and was living with us and was with us on that camping trip.
Oh, wow.
I had no memory of it. And so for all these years, I've told the story without Norma there. Mm-hmm. You know, and just last week, I'm on the phone. She goes, "How come you didn't say anything about me?" And I said, you know, it's crazy. So the thing about memory is every time and check it out, you can check it out in your life, you know. Mm-hmm. Once you tell a story about a memory that you have, every time from then on, unless you consciously change it, you're going to tell that story the same way.
Right.
So for most of what I'm writing, dear friends, I have no idea if it's the truth.
But there are people in your life that can not necessarily fact check, but be like, yeah, that sounds about right. Well, we only have a few minutes left, but so what's your, do you have a timeline? Like, when are you hoping?
Well, I really don't. It's a long process. I have found out you don't just sit down and write a book. I mean, after I get this manuscript finished, it has to be turned into an e-book, what they call an e-book. Mm-hmm. And then from the e-book, I can do an audiobook. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, you know, it's years.
Yes. Well, and it sounds fascinating. We're going to have you back on for more of
I would be glad
these sections, because that was a fantastic story, and I can imagine just a whole book being filled with those kind of experiences.
Look at me now, it's like, this little old lady, you know, that story, no. You know,
just wait, you have pictures.
That's right, and I'm really glad I do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for bringing in your story and kind of sharing with us. It's been really interesting to hear, just kind of the idea of the memoir and working through it and what you said about memory. And I hope you have a really wonderful experience kind of going back, and can't wait to hear more and see this out and about.
I appreciate it, Courtney.
Thank you. And just out of curiosity, you said this was about 1967? Okay. Oh my goodness. I'm still reeling over the snake. It was wonderful. Thank you for joining me, and thanks again for joining us on Arts Alive.